What's up, everybody? So last week, Netflix released a new documentary called What Jennifer Did. It's a very interesting watch, but a very disturbing watch as well. It is about a girl that hired people to kill her parents. Now, unfortunately, her mother did die, but her father did survive the attack. And since that documentary came out, and it's only been a couple of days, I believe it came out on Wednesday, and today is Saturday, and a lot of people are talking about how the police got her to confess, how they were able to get her to break and give her confession. So I figured I would go over the technique used. Now, the Toronto Star wrote an amazing article about that technique back in 2016, and I will link it in the description below. It's at thestar.com. The headline of that article is "The Story Behind the Confession of Jennifer Pan." Now, most of this is from a book called A Daughter's Deadly Deception that was written by Jeremy, Grimaldi. In the article, it states, police used the Reid technique, a tactic so controversial it has been outlawed in many countries because of the risk of false confessions. It also leaves many asking the same question. If you can't lie to police, why can they lie to you? That's an excerpt from A Daughter's Deadly Deception. I have not read that book, but I'm definitely going to pick it up if I can find it out there. I'm going to check Amazon after this. If it is available on Amazon, I will link it in the description below. If not, I'm going to have to go book hunting to find this book. Now, here's what the Reid technique is. The Reid technique requires officers to reinforce sincerity, to ensure the suspect is receptive to their overtures, hence why the detective shares with Jennifer his own experiences. When he reminisces about his time playing piano, he inaccurately refers to the ballet Swan Lake as Swans on the Lake, prompting a smile from Jennifer. He then asks her if she switched jobs from East Side Mario's to Boston Pizza for better tips, again drawing a smile from Jennifer, who seems to somewhat enjoy the attention being lavished on her. The conversation focuses not only on her achievements, but her struggles, as if she's reminiscing with someone who really understands what she's been through. Scheduled existence she claims to have suffered through as a child and teenager takes center stage. Jennifer remarks how little time there was for anything other than school, competitive skating, and piano lessons. Her parents constantly comparing her to her classmates, teammates, and cousins also affected her negatively, she says. And when the detective suggests that Jennifer never thought of herself as being as smart her parents imagined, Jennifer agrees. At one point, she tells the detective that she was under so much pressure during her teenage years that she was compelled to forge high school report cards to mask her average grades, turning them into exceptional ones. Her lies multiplied from there. She confesses, morphing into a bogus university career after her applications to higher learning were rejected. In the documentary, it talks about how she told her parents she was going to university for something like 4 years, I believe it was, and she never did. It was more than just her schooling that she ended up lying about. Jennifer tells the detective she dated Daniel without their knowledge or consent for 7 years. Daniel Wong was her ex-boyfriend at the time, who helped set everything up against her parents. I hid it from my parents at first because they didn't agree with me having a boyfriend, she says. They didn't like the fact that he was of mixed race, and they told me to stop seeing him. She tried to keep her separation from Daniel permanent, but somehow she'd always end up back in his arms. He was the person who filled an empty void, she says. So when we broke up, I felt that part of me was missing. Eventually, though, the option to run back to Daniel was wrenched from her grasp. Her parents offered Jennifer an ultimatum. After she was caught lying one final time, she was told to either stay with the family or go with Daniel and never return. Jennifer chose her family and was kept at home, rarely let out of her parents' sight, she contends. This is when Daniel decided to move on with another woman. Jennifer explains how depression eventually led to cutting and then finally a failed suicide attempt. As for how she felt having to remain home under strict guidelines for some 18 months after she was given the ultimatum, she states it was difficult. In response, the detective empathizes with Jennifer, at one point even giggling at her deceit, justifying her behavior. He even labels her parents' treatment of their daughter as abuse, suggesting their expectations were just too high. I get that feeling. It's pretty tough to live up to their expectations, he states after Jennifer tells him that if she could, she'd become a piano teacher. Your dad would ultimately like you to be a doctor, that type of thing, but maybe you can't do it. Those are pretty high standards for anybody. Not everybody can be a doctor, but they may have acted like you could have done it no problem. But his empathy doesn't last. Now that he's gained the personal knowledge required to implement his technique, the Reid technique, the conversation slowly shifts back to her behavior. In the lead up to the night of the murder, the detective asks Jennifer if she told a family member that the intruders liked her and that's why they kept her alive. I didn't say that, she insists after a moment. I asked them why I couldn't be with them, meaning her parents, and they're just like, you cooperated, keep cooperating. The detective asks Jennifer to list the African Canadian males she knows, explaining that the police have a photo of her speaking with a black man in a cafe. She names only 2 men, identifying the male she met in the cafe months before the murder as only Rick. He's not a friend, he's more of a friend of mine's roommate, Jennifer contends, but I did meet up with him once. It's at this point she admits to lending Rick $1,100 because he and his roommate, Andrew, were having rent problems. The detective asks if this was the same Andrew she spoke with the night of the murder. Jennifer says it was. These 2 admissions signal an interlude as the detective shifts his tactics anew, heaping further pressure on Jennifer. Suddenly she sheds his friendly and engaging demeanor and begins to sow strife between them. Step 1 of the Reid technique: direct confrontation. Would it make sense for someone that was going to kill somebody to leave a witness behind that could describe them? Does that make sense for the killers? He asks, do you think that was a mistake they made then? You must think about this. I still do, and I've spoken to a therapist about it, Jennifer responds before repeating her well-worn line that she cooperated and that the men kept saying it was taking too long, implying that they had no time to shoot her because they were forced to flee. To Jennifer's dismay, the detective then recounts the events once more. I don't want to go through this again, she tells the detective. When the detective gets up and leaves to get some water, Jennifer curls back up into the fetal position, gripping her head tightly as silence fills the room. She begins to make noise that sounds like squeals. When the detective returns, he asks her to recount the denominations of the bills that made up the $2,500 she handed over to number 1. How long was the cash in her night table? How big was the stack? These probing questions continue until the detective enters the next to last phase of the interview. In my experience as a police officer, no matter what the case is, people make mistakes, as in they don't always tell the truth, he says as she strokes her braid, repeatedly winding the tip between her fingers. The detective uses the trickery that Jennifer has honed for so many years against her. The police are going over that house with a fine-tooth comb. They're going over every hair fiber, every skin cell, every bit of blood. You know what DNA is, right? We have to reach out to modern technology. So another thing we utilize is satellites. The satellite is a 24-hour video that is going on. It's recording information. The military uses it for precision bombing, and we're able to go back and review it. That's like an x-ray. We're able to tell, are the people in positions that the witness is telling us they were in, or are they different? Another thing we do is talk to a lot of people. We don't leave any rock unturned. You've heard of Crime Stoppers, right? When you get a case like this, people want to help. It's in the papers, it's everywhere. So people end up coming to us to help out with the case. You don't know how many people call in their friends. They want that money they get greedy. The Reid technique clearly states that an interrogator must try to discourage the suspect from denying his or her guilt. True to form, the detective refuses to let Jennifer get a word in edgewise. She speaks little for the following 60 minutes, but he eventually offers her a way out. Nothing surprises me in this job. I am well aware that anyone on this earth is capable of making a mistake, he tells her as she bows her head. I don't care if they're a priest or a school teacher. One thing that you have to remember is that your dad was there and your dad had a front row seat to all of this. Your dad is a very smart man and he has a very clear perception of what's going on. A lot of the things you told the police didn't happen. It doesn't match at all. After alleging guilt and implying that the police have proof of such guilt, the detective now seemingly shifts his attention to step 2 of the Reid technique, shifting the blame away from the suspect, justifying her behavior and excusing the crime. You've spent a considerable amount of time over the past 7 years telling half-truths, and I can understand why. You've had a tough life. What's happened to you, to me, equates to abuse. Now you're under a tremendous amount of stress. You're involved in this. I know that. You've lived your whole life trying to live up to expectations that you can't make. You're a 24-year-old woman being treated like a 15-year-old. You're not the first person to lie about dating a guy because in your culture they don't accept it. Then he offers her a chance to confess. Who else is involved in this? I don't know, Jennifer manages to say, still stroking her hair but listening intently. Using her father's description of a white male in the house, the detective accuses Jennifer of falsifying number 1's description entirely. He then moves back into the accusatory stage, treating her guilt as a fact they've already established before justifying it. We know that you were involved. We also know that you're a good person that's made a mistake here, he states. You got involved with the wrong people. You didn't want to keep living this lie. Everyone knows, and you're getting that feeling. Nobody is surprised here. You are a prisoner in your own house. You are living someone else's expectations. No matter how much they love you, they're taken away, Jen. The Jen that just wanted to be a piano teacher, why is that not good enough? Why not just be a lab technician? Why a doctor? Why does it always have to be something bigger? It was a form of abuse, he continues. You can't do that to a person. This is Canada. We're in the 21st century here. It's like your dad fixing everybody else's home, but not his own. It's the same with you. He was trying to make a future for you bigger than it should have been. The good thing is that you didn't shoot anyone here. You couldn't do that. You're not that type of person, right? As part of the Reid technique, the investigator must be seated in a wheeled chair and the suspect in a fixed one so that the interrogator can wheel close either to show sympathy or make the suspect feel she is cornered. As the detective begins to accuse Jennifer, he inches the chair closer and closer to her until the pair are almost touching, his burly stature bearing down on her. You're involved in this. I know that, he tells her as she continues to fiddle with her hair. There's no question about it. The only question right now is, are you going to keep making mistakes? Just before the 3-hour mark, after about 45 minutes of the detective droning in on his vein, Jennifer finally starts to crack. After barely a peep for so long, she utters a muffled, inaudible sentence. She repeats it, this time loud enough for the detective and the audio system to pick up. What happens to me? So that is how they got Jennifer to confess. That's how they got Jennifer Pan to confess. They used the Reid technique. I've heard about it before, I've read about it before, but never in that great of detail. I'm definitely going to see if this person's book is still available. If it is, I'm going to pick it up. I'll put a link in the description if it is available on Amazon. If not, check your local bookstores. It's called A Daughter's Deadly Deception. Pick it up. I'm sure it's an extremely interesting read. But what do you think? What do you think of this whole thing? What do you think of Jennifer Pan's confession? What do you think of the interrogation technique used? What do you think of the whole story? Have you seen the documentary on Netflix, What Jennifer Did? Let me know. Leave some comments below. Hope you're having a good day, and I will see you again soon.